welcome to the another episode of the Tech Twitter. And today I have been joined by one of the very amazing as well as the experienced person from the tech industry. He's Ahmed from the tech industry and he's having more than 25 years of tech experience, right? The last time I interacted with Ahmed on the Zoom call, I would like to mention some points. That is, he's the man who actually introduced Linux to the Canadian government, right?
Yes, I was
And
responsible for that silliness.
so you can guess about the experience that person is having. Without any giving any much introduction, I would like to give the mic to the Ahmed now. So Ahmed, first of all, thanks for joining me in here, and please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, Nitish. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And, so introducing myself, it's very straightforward. Started in the technology industry back in 1989, I think. I was 17 years old, and I got my start by helping someone visualize data using Lotus 123, which is a precursor to Microsoft Excel. And from there, in 92, when Linux came out, I had already played with a bunch of different Unix systems. When Linus Torvalds released Linux and it started sort of spreading around in the underground, I got very fascinated by it because then I could run a Linux environment or a Unix type environment on my PC, which, if I recall correctly, when I first started it, it was a 386, and then for the longest time, my platform was a 486 66 megahertz machine with 8 megabytes of RAM, and Linux ran on it beautifully. And that was the beginning of my tech journey. So I've been, I guess, in tech for a very long time. it's been 34 years.
Basically, 30 plus years of experience, right?
Yes, 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 for sure.
Perfect. You're the person who actually witnessed how the Linux actually changed the tech industry, right? So I want to know, getting back into the 90s, how did the tech industry actually felt a change when Linux was introduced?
This was right around the time when Steve Jobs had left Apple and started Next. So we knew that Unix type operating systems, which Next was coming down into the world of the workstations that were not, $20,000 a pop, but down to sub $10,000 a pop. But when and we had other Unix flavors that were available on the that could run on the Intel architecture, but there was SCO Unix, there were some other flavors of commercially available Unix systems. One from AT&T. There was like a BSD flavor that you could run. When Linux came along, it became very accessible because it was the missing piece out of the open source toolset that was coming out of the GNU Foundation. GNU had 3 or 4 very strong technologies. The GNU C compiler was extremely strong, and that was the preferred C compiler on most Unix platforms, even though every Unix platform came with its own C compiler. So, when you installed something like Sun OS or Solaris later on, or if you had Unix from HP called HPUX, which ran primarily on PA RISC chipset, or DEC Unix, or which was Ultrix, and then there were all these different operating systems. Or if you went outside, if you went to the mini computer, or if you went to different flavors, different variants. GNU C compiler was this one thing that could run across all of them. It had some very advanced features, and it produced because it was open source. It was really well maintained, and people could optimize it and play with it, and were contributing to it really enthusiastically. And there were the compendium tools like extended Linux extended utilities like a better version of ls command, or a better version of cat, or all the basic commands that we use in Linux today, which are all available on Unix, etc. The versions were better. Also, there was the shell that was used, which was POSIX compliant, was called Bourne shell, and Bourne shell was very old and buggy. And then there was something that came along that was called the Corn shell, which was supposed to be fast, and people really liked it. But then when Bash was released, which is called Born Again shell, that basically provided this uniform shell that could run on all these platforms, and you could do really strong shell scripting. And the make utility, which is the primary utility used to manage development of packages, which is the GNU make. The extensions that were added in there in order to make things uniform, that was very strong. So we had all these tools, right? There's auto configure, auto tools, GNU make, Bourne shell, a better Lexer in Flex, a better compiler generator in Bison. These fundamental tools that make it a better editor in VI, etc. That were very that were fundamental to being able to use an environment, and having that uniform across multiple hardware architectures was extremely useful. The only problem was that there was no kernel. There was no operating system kernel that was uniform across all these hardwares, right? There was an effort to create a kernel called GNU Hurd, Hurd, which never took off the ground, because there was just too much going on with it, both from a community perspective as well as contribution, that didn't really make it viable to pursue. And then all of a sudden Linus Torvalds, as he pronounces his name, decided that he wanted to make his 386 a faster computer. He did not like Minix, which was a toy operating system, which is what was used to teach operating system theory, he didn't really want to use Windows or anything like that. And he released his first version, and everybody really liked it because it was very pragmatic, and it had one purpose, which was to be a speedy easy to program, easy to develop in kernel. Now, that did not really take off except except in these niche groups for almost um, 5 years. It had really rapid uptick. When you mentioned me introducing it to the Canadian government, I was working on a project over there around GPS corrections, and we needed stable systems, and Linux kernel was, the Slackware had come out, and I I don't know if we had Red Hat yet. Red Hat was not there yet, but we had Slackware, and we had another distribution called Yggdrasil, which Yggdrasil contributed a lot to bringing X11 uh, Windows system to Linux, and X11 was the workstation. That was the graphical user interface backbone on which all of the graphical interfaces for all Unixes ran, and then with that and the advent of web, so we had a second thing happen at the same time in around 95, 94, 95, which is the first web server got created, and that was created on the next computer that Steve Jobs had built, right? And that operating system was Unix based, but the next workstations, they were only workstations, there were no servers. The next workstations were very expensive. They were like $14,000 to start. However, that entire code base was written in GCC, and when Linux came out, we could port it to Linux, and now you had cheap web servers. And that, combined with the tool set, combined with this expanding world of web, NCSA Mosaic, and then the Apache server on the back end, and then Netscape becoming what it did, which the iteration of Firefox. This is Netscape, and in 1996, Sun Microsystems released Java, which was supposed to be the programming language that was platform agnostic. All of those things worked together, right, to feed each other, and it was just this bloom that happened, making Linux the choice for server side.
Interesting. I mean, that's when the tech industry actually got changed, or we can say the revolutionized, right?
Oh yes, for sure. I mean, that's exactly what made high quality computability available, with where engineers, scientists, hobbyists, hackers in the old sense, tinkerers, everybody could get access to advanced computing tools without being tied into ecosystems that are restrictive. It just made a lot of sense. The stuff that was coming out of IBM and Microsoft, which were the two major software players of the time for that had anything to do with consumers. IBM definitely dominated the enterprise, along with Hewlett Packard and Sun Microsystems. With digital, with digital, sort of being left behind because they didn't innovate fast enough, and then there were niche players like Silicon Graphics, SGI, who were really good at advanced 3D graphics. But for the most part, the only thing that was accessible for pure play was Linux. Windows NT, and eventually Windows 2000, etc. They were Windows NT 3.1, Windows NT 3, which was the server version of Windows 3, Windows 3.1, and anything like that. They focus too much on end user, and there was no server server side stuff. The only server side stuff that was available for small and medium sized businesses was Novell NetWare, which integrated with Windows a lot, but that was just file sharing, and its networking was very proprietary, and if it ran its own protocol called IPX, which has nothing to do with Internet Protocol, right? It was just interchange packet, inter-packet exchange. I think is the expansion. So when we get into technology being available in the hands of regular people, and with Bill Gates making the deal that he did with IBM, which allowed clone like PC clone makers to sell Windows, which made PCs accessible to the masses, and then a portion of that could now run this server class stuff. Now you had an ecosystem, right? It's all sort of interconnected that way, if that makes any sense. Sorry for the long
Got
answer.
it. Got it. No, no, no. It's interesting.